you. Well, good evening, everyone. Jim, thank you so much. I am very proud of the fact that I was your articling student. And I'm very proud of the fact that all of the advice that you gave me, not just about politics and law, but about life, mattered an awful lot to decisions that I made. You were a great friend, and I thank you very kindly for that tremendous introduction. It's been an honor for me to be here tonight and to think back to so many of those political memories that have taken place in this room. And we all have those memories. But when I think about tonight, and I see Premier Lougheed and Mrs. Lougheed sitting here amongst your friends, your supporters, and your family, I must say that it is more than an honor. It is an honor that I take very seriously, that we are here to pay tribute to you as a great Albertan and a great Canadian, an outstanding leader, one of my personal role models, and our country's best premier for the last 40 years, you, Peter Lougheed. And before I begin, I want to thank the Institute for Research on Public Policy for hosting this gala dinner here in Calgary, and for the tremendous work that you do to improve public policy in Canada. It is in this context tonight that we honor our Premier Peter Lougheed, because the foundation of good policy is engagement. It's getting people excited about where they live and what they think and what they want their future to be. And to me, that means being able to discuss the issues of the day, not only in political forums or formal consultations, but in our backyards, across our fences, and around the dinner table. And I want Albertans to do this. I want to invite people who have felt themselves to be outside of the circle of decision making to get involved. I want Albertans to feel that they have a voice in the decisions that affect them and to use that voice. I want these things because public policy matters. And we shouldn't be surprised, as our Prime Minister said, when bad policy leads to bad results, as it inevitably does. So I believe that as government and as an engaged citizenry, we have a shared moral obligation to craft the best policy that we can. And this happens when people are fully engaged in the issues, when they debate and they discuss and they come to a consensus on what the outcomes of policy should be, what our future should be, and when together we find ways to reach those outcomes. And that builds the trust that we need to achieve greatness here in Alberta and in Canada. And that is why the work of the Institute is so vital, because it drives good public policy as a fundamental value in Canada. And that legacy is tremendously important. In this case, the Institute is furthering good policy by recognizing real leadership in the form of our country's most transformational provincial leaders over the last 4 decades, and looking at what lessons we can learn from those leaders to improve public policy going forward. And tonight, I'd like to share with you the lessons that I have drawn from a truly inspirational leader, from the best premier over the last 40 years, Premier Lougheed. Our country is fortunate to have many outstanding leaders, including several that have come from Alberta, many who are in this room tonight, and many who we've seen on screens tonight. And each has put their own stamp on the job. And each responded to the issues of the day with insight, fortitude, and dedication, and in the public interest. For me, I think as for many people in the room, and for the majority of the jury at IRPP, Peter Lougheed stands head and shoulders above his peers. And I feel that I've been fortunate to have many mentors and role models in my life. I think particularly among those, I think of my grandparents, in particular my grandfather, whose dinner table discussions got me interested in church and community, in government and politics from a very early age. And I also learned from the many political leaders that I worked with during my time overseas. I was fortunate, as Jim mentioned, to work in a lot of places around the world in tremendously challenging circumstances. They were learning experiences that do help to build a foundation and a confidence that people can make the right decisions for themselves. But I have to say, and I think many of you in this room will agree, that one of my first and my most powerful inspirations was right here at home in Alberta. I was 7 years old when Peter Lougheed's Progressive Conservative government defeated social credit, launching a political dynasty that I have been honored to be part of, as a volunteer, as a door knocker, as someone that cared about the future, attended provincial conventions right here in this room, with many people in this room who are proud Progressive Conservatives. Peter Lougheed was the premier of my formative years, politically speaking. He was the leader of my party when I decided to be a Progressive Conservative. I was always interested in politics from a very early age, so I was very excited to have the opportunity to meet Peter Lougheed at a 1982 policy conference at the Airport Hotel in Edmonton. And it was a thrill in my life. And this was a man who came to political conventions, and he sat in the room, and he listened to what Albertans said. He listened. And he listened to what mattered to Albertans. And he made his ministers sit right there with him. And those sessions went on for hours. And that's fortitude. I would say that in Peter Lougheed, I found a role model that I could look up to, a dynamic leader, a young leader. None of us in Alberta had ever seen anything quite like this. And one of your greatest qualities was that you were unquestionably devoted to Alberta and to Alberta's interests. And as has been said tonight by you and many others, that came from the fact that you were a great Canadian. You didn't see Alberta succeeding despite or at the expense of the rest of Canada. You saw your province as a proud and a contributing member of the Canadian family in which all members needed to succeed together. You saw an Alberta that was on the cusp of something remarkable. You recognized that this province could play a great role within Canada and share its many gifts with other Canadians and around the world. I speak of our Western values, our traditions of self-reliance and compassion, entrepreneurial drive, and community spirit. That wonderful blend of socially progressive views and fiscally conservative practices that has shaped our province and made it such a remarkable place to live. These are Alberta's gifts. And Premier Lougheed saw that they could enrich not only our own province, but also our country. And we would all be better for it. It was true then, and it's true now. Albertans are rightfully proud of our province, and they want to engage with our country and the world around us. And they want to play a meaningful role in its future. Peter Lougheed saw those qualities in Albertans, even before many Albertans saw them in themselves. And that brings me to my second point. Peter Lougheed was very much a man of his times. After I became premier, I was often asked if I thought that my victory symbolized change in Alberta. My answer was that Albertans had already changed, and our politics was just catching up with Albertans. I believe the same must be said for when Peter Lougheed became our premier. Our province has changed, but our politics hadn't caught up. And Peter Lougheed sensed that change. He represented the new Alberta with candidates and policies that reflected the new times of our province, the new times that we were living in, and the new aspirations that we had as Albertans. He was not easily defined as right-wing or left-wing, and I'm not sure these labels had any more relevance then than they do now. He was simply someone who was dedicated to providing leadership for the real world and the real Alberta, with common sense solutions for real problems. Peter was, and remains today, a man of vision. His goals for Alberta were big, bold, and ambitious. Where others looked at the oil sands and saw no prospect of commercial success, Premier Lougheed saw potential, and we all need to thank him for that. Premier Lougheed had great optimism, a quality that Albertans continue to display in everything they do now. And you had faith that the creators and innovators in our province would find a way to do what was thought to be impossible, to turn an unwieldy resource of questionable value in an isolated corner of the province into a multi-billion-dollar international energy producer. Premier Lougheed launched the Alberta Oil Sands Technology and Research Authority, AOSTRA, and you spoke a little bit about that earlier tonight. It spurred many of the technological advances that made the oil sands possible and what they are today. A solid foundation for long-term stability and prosperity for our province and for our nation. Our government is looking to build on that work with AOSTRA 2, a renewed effort to drive the development of cleaner, greener, extractive technologies in the oil sands, to build on a continuing legacy that was started by Premier Peter Lougheed and something that which you are still truly passionate and committed about today. The Lougheed legacy, as we heard earlier tonight, also includes Albertans' cherished Heritage Savings and Trust Fund. This is an Alberta innovation that demonstrated tremendous foresight, planning for a post-oil and gas era at a time when that industry had yet to reach its peak. And this is the long-range thinking that we expect, but so seldom see. In government, the pressures of today are always upon you, as in life. Setting money aside for tomorrow instead of spending everything you have now makes intuitive sense. But it's a very hard sell in politics. It's tough to make decisions for decades down the road when electoral cycles are 4 or 5 years. Taking this kind of step requires fortitude and long-range thinking, doing what's right instead of what's politically expedient or popular. And Peter Lougheed was that kind of leader. Finally, I want to mention a third example of Peter Lougheed's vision, and that is culture. I've had the pleasure of attending several events recently where both Mrs. Lougheed and Peter's Lougheed influence on culture was celebrated, including the recent Alberta Film and Television Awards. And the list of your accomplishments is truly stunning. You both supported actively the first provincial film festival, the Banff International Television Festival, Canada's first film and television incentive program, the Alberta Motion Picture Development Corporation, the first Film Commission office in Canada, the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, the Banff Centre, and Calgary's Epcor Centre. More than a legacy to Alberta, but tremendously important. And this is because you both believe, as do I and most Albertans, the quality of life is not determined by the size of your paycheck or the size of your house. It's about culture, the arts, museums, and music that speaks to who we are as a people and what we want to aspire to be as a province. Your legacy here, like so many great things, is the result of a collaboration of great minds. It's a co-production between a wonderful team, between Mrs. Lougheed and Premier Lougheed, on whose sage advice the first Provincial Ministry of Culture was created. And I must say also, and I can say this from personal experience, that political life puts tremendous pressure on a household and on family. And I know that I couldn't do the job that I do today without the support of my family, and especially my husband, Glenn. And I know that Peter couldn't have done the job that he has done as Premier of this province without Mrs. Lougheed's support. You are a caring, kind, smart, funny, and tough woman. And you need to be, but you're always charming. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I thank you so much for your contribution to this province. I can only imagine that to be the spouse of a premier is very difficult. You share in all of the heartaches of the job, and you feel every criticism and comment that someone makes about the one that you love. Yet, I believe that it's a role that you have handled with trademark grace and good humor. and you truly are one of our treasures. Thank you. Both Mrs. Lougheed and Premier Lougheed, as has been mentioned tonight, were guided by an ethic of public service. We saw this time and time again when you were Premier. But I think it's just as significant that your public service and dedication to this province didn't end with your time in elected office. Your commitment to Alberta has never wavered. Your commitment to Canada has never wavered. Nearly 30 years after leaving office, you remain a well-respected and eminent voice on matters of public policy. Your opinion, rightly, is highly sought after. And I have felt very honored to have your advice, to have your attention to issues that still matter to this province, and that you've taken the time to talk to me about those. I will tell you, and I haven't said publicly, that it was a very emotional day for me during the campaign when you decided to enter into that very difficult race and to endorse our candidacy, and I thank you very much for that from the bottom of my heart. You are a man that we all regard as a great leader. You are an icon in our province and the father of our party. And I was touched when you saw that our party today is something that follows from what you started 5 decades ago. A couple of weeks ago, when we were attending a legislature event together, the event that Premier Lougheed talked about, where we honored spouses of premiers from the very beginning of our province, which is a wonderful display. You asked if you could come to the legislature and see your old office, which is now my office. And it gave me pause. It gave me pause. I sit in that office nearly every day doing business and paperwork. But that was the first time that it really struck me that it had been the office of a long line of remarkable premiers, with Peter Lougheed foremost among them. And I took the opportunity to ask you some advice that day, and your words were simple. Peter, you told me to govern for Albertans, no matter where they live, north, south, east, or west. The government's job is to reflect Albertans' values and to provide the services and the programs that Albertans want and need. As guidance for a new premier, and I believe for any political leader, I think that advice is as sound as it gets. That's advice that I intend to follow, knowing that I serve at the pleasure of Albertans, and as part of a long, proud political tradition that began with you. Premier Lougheed, you created a direction that we can all be proud of today, one that gives all of us in this room the quality of life that we enjoy as Albertans and Canadians, and that gave many of us in this room and our families the opportunity to excel, to succeed, and to define the future that we want in our own terms. It has been an honor for me to get to know you, to sit in your office, and to learn from you what a real leader is and does. You were the kind of premier that I do aspire to be, and I want to congratulate you on this tremendous honor tonight. No one deserves it more. And I know that everyone here and Albertans across the province join me in congratulating you and thanking you and wishing you and Mrs. Lougheed all the best and many more blessings in the days to come. And I say most humbly on behalf of all Albertans and Canadians, thank you. And now I'd ask you, before I close, to honor me by coming to the stage, and Ian will tell us what we have to do next. Thank you.
Well, we have a presentation shot here. Mr. Premier, this is Premier Redford is going to present you with a certificate, framed certificate as the best provincial premier of the last 40 years, and we hope you'll hang it somewhere in your house or your office. Right there, Premier. Yeah, there we go. Do you want to say another word? Or are you okay?